Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s, your retro time machine back to my favorite time period, the 1990s, of course. You can tell by the title. I always like to do this every once in a while. If you haven't seen this before, it's a podcast where obviously I go back to the 90s. I look at everything through a lens of pop culture, sports, things I'm into, wrestling. Tales from the Crypt, of course, is a huge thing with me, as you can tell by the font of this, the whatever you call it, the picture in the background. I'm real technical here, you can tell. But also the name of it, Tales from the... But anyway, I pick a random month in a year and go back to the 90s and don't do anything in chronological order. I just jump all over the place. Last year I was in September of 95. This year I'm going, or this week I should say, this episode, I'm going back a little bit, about 9 months earlier to December of 1994. This is my 8th trip working through 1994. You can check all those episodes out on here, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or listening on Spotify. They're all on here. Anyway, I turned 11 in this month because I was born in December, and I was in 4th grade, so let's get going.
Viewer warning. The following program contains material that may be too intense for some viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and more yawns. Play kickball in the street, man, those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
And it's actually, it's happened a couple times, but especially kind of funny this month that I'm actually recording this podcast in December of 2025, and I'm talking about it in December, so definitely in the Christmas mood, so I'll be talking about Christmas, especially towards the end of this. Do want to mention, being a Christmas, there's a bonus episode. I do one of these a month. It can go on like any topic that's not just the 90s. This month I decided to do one talking about what it was like at my grandma's house, Granny as we called her, during the holidays, especially Christmas. It's a book I wrote about 11 years ago. It's called Over the River and Through the Woods, and I actually read it during the podcast. It don't come out till December 27th. I figure put it out a couple days after Christmas, because, you know, especially during this time, I'll be lucky if I get anybody to watch anything. Everybody's so busy with plans and this, buying this, and going to this place and all that. But it'll come out then, and like I said, it's a book I wrote, about 20 pages. This podcast isn't that long. I read the book on there, and then I just kind of stop in between and give thoughts and stuff. And like I said, if you don't know me, the podcast probably won't interest you, because it's a lot about my personal life and stuff and how special that place was. But it may interest you. You might want to listen to it, and maybe it'll remind you of a special place like that you had maybe growing up or even now. But yeah, that's the bonus episode. I've already got recorded, don't have an editor or nothing, but I actually recorded that one early because last month all my hospital stuff, my video game episode didn't actually come out till this month. So I actually had 2 bonus episodes this month and none last month. Check that one out, the video game one. It's all about talking about video games. There's an interview with my wife on there, and my brother did a phone interview. It was really fun. And also, let me know what we should cover for January's bonus episode. I don't have an idea of what to do. I think February I might do something talking about my brothers, and hopefully I can get them all on here in different phone interviews. But let me know, like, January. I don't have anything planned. Anything you think I should talk about, whether you want me to make a rankings of some subject, or just talk about a subject, or just whatever. Anyway, we're done talking about all that. We're here for December of 1994. Like I said, I was turning 11 in this month at that time. And see, it's weird when I go through these that, not to get sidetracked, but when I go through these, I always got to figure out how old I was. It's not that year I was born, or not that year. It's like I take away a year because I was born in December. So all throughout that year, I was like, you know, I hadn't turned the age I was going to turn. Literally, my birthday is a week before the next year. So it's like barely at the end. But anyway, I was 11, and I was in 4th grade, which meant the dreaded Mrs. Weiss. I've talked about her before. Probably the teacher I didn't like the most. It's a nice way of saying the teacher I hated the most. And she didn't like me either. We definitely clashed. a lot of times I was reading wrestling magazines in her classroom, but I've told about that before in stories about how I acquired those wrestling magazines, and I'm not proud of it, and I got in trouble for it. But anyway, moving on, we're actually going to talk about wrestling to start with. This was 1994, of course. ECW was still... They were getting extreme then, but still they were like... I think this is like their second year. I'm not sure... I forgot to look up to see whether they were called Extreme Championship Wrestling then. They might have been. But anyway, they had the title of their Supercard, because they didn't have pay-per-views then. They had what was called Supercards, which was like their big events. And then they would take... like in this one... They took matches from it and showed them over the course of 3 episodes of what they called Hardcore TV, which is their TV show, which I was not watching ECW at the time. I didn't even know it existed other than pictures in PWI magazines. I thought it was just some independent thing, like some of the other stuff in there. You read through the arena reports in those, which, by the way, I've actually been published in a few PWI magazines, my arena reports, where I would send in stuff, and they'd print it. Also, they actually printed our Supreme Wrestling Top 10 rankings a couple times, and I got, I don't remember if my name was on that, but anyway, I sent them in, so I've actually appeared in PWI magazine, which is pretty cool. But anyway, back to ECW, like I said, I thought they were just another independent promotion. A lot of the names, like Sabu, the Tasmaniac, Public Enemy, never heard of those people before. I just glanced at them in the magazine and, went on to read what I cared about, the WWF and the WCW. But anyway, going back and watching some of this stuff is really cool. But anyway, they had their event called Holiday Hell, December 17th from the ECW Arena, which is, of course, where they had most of their events from. The main event was the ECW Tag Team Champions, the Public Enemy. They defeated Sabu and the Tasmaniac, because that was what Taz was called then. It was the Tasmaniac. They were managed by Paul E. Dangerously, but they beat them to retain the titles. And then WWF didn't have any pay-per-view or major events this month, but WCW had what was known as one of their biggest pay-per-views of the year, and this one turned out to be pretty much a flop, thanks to Hogan and his influence. But this was WCW Starrcade 94. It was called the Triple Threat because of a triple main event, and I use that lightly. It was from Nashville, Tennessee, and it was the 12th annual Starrcade. Of course, Starrcade started in 1983 with a Flair for the Gold, as they called it, when Ric Flair was coming back and facing Harley Race for the NWA World Title, and that was he'd already been champion once or maybe twice. I can't remember if it was once or twice, but this was his first big run, and this was when he was the good guy. Of course, we all know Ric Flair would move on to the mid-'80s to be the bad guy. 4 Horsemen taking on Dusty Rhodes, Nikita Koloff, Sting, all that. But that was back then. During this, he wasn't there because he'd lost the loser leaves WCW match against Hogan, which of course didn't last long. But anyway, this is known as one of the worst Starrcades in history. One of the main events started the show. Vader with Harley Race defeated WCW U.S. champion Hacksaw Jim Duggan to win the title. And of course, Hacksaw Jim Duggan was one of Hogan's boys, and I know a lot of people hold a special place in their heart for him, and I do too. But during this time, he was not the Hacksaw Jim Duggan of the 80s. Didn't hardly, his matches didn't last long. Hogan was known for bringing in his friends at this time, from John Tenta to the Nasty Boys and Brutus the Barber Beefcake, which I'll be talking about in a little bit. But he came in famously, that big contract, and they literally had a parade for him when he signed. And then he brings all his friends in, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan literally beat stunning Steve Austin, that same Steve Austin that went on to be Stone Cold Steve Austin, beat him in 30 seconds for the U.S. title. And here Vader beat him for it. But, Vader didn't stay in the company too much longer. I talked last week on about September 95 when the Monday Night Wars started. That was the month that Vader actually left the company. But the other main event, Sting defeated Avalanche, one of Hogan's boys again, by DQ. And then the main event, WCW World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan with Jimmy Hart retained his title, pinning the Butcher, which is, of course, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, the Zodiac, the Booty Man, the Disciple. Those are just some of his names. He was a leech that even in the him and Hogan even had went their separate ways eventually once he realized what a leech he was. But I mean, I don't like speaking ill. He's not dead. I don't think he is. But I don't like, try not to speak ill of people too much. But yeah, he was just a leech. He had one good gimmick in WWF as Brutus the Barber Beefcake whenever he started cutting people's hair, and that got over really well. But I mean, outside of that, he should have just stayed there and stayed as that. But of course, he had to go follow Hogan and got a big, huge deal from Eric Bischoff, I'm sure, because he was there in WCW seemingly forever, like doing nothing. But I guarantee he's probably sitting home half the time getting paid. But anyway, speaking of getting paid, on December 3rd, Macho Man Randy Savage actually debuted in WCW on WCW Saturday Night. It was after his contract expired. And of course, you're like, he didn't debut on Nitro or a pay-per-view? Well, pay-per-view would have made a little sense, especially with Starrcade, but they wanted to get him on there sooner. But anyway, Nitro didn't exist at this time. WCW Saturday Night was actually their biggest show. So that was where all the debuts and stuff and the big angles for the pay-per-views took place. Of course, there was a Clash of Champions, but that wasn't even every month. It was either every other month or every 3 months, whenever they decided to have it. I love the Clash of the Champions because it felt like a pay-per-view, but it was on TBS, so it was for free. Well, if you had cable, but you know what I mean. If you didn't have cable, you wouldn't be watching WCW Saturday Night either. You'd be watching Worldwide or Pro or Main Event, whichever ones they had on syndication. Some of those they had on TBS, but a couple they had on syndication where you could watch them on your local channels. But yeah, he left WWF, and there's a lot of bad feelings there, the way he left, because Vince wanted him to stay but wanted him to be a commentator. Macho Man didn't think his career was over, which he went on to wrestle for another good 6-7 years. Had some of his obviously he didn't have like the Macho Man Ricky Steamboat, Macho Man Hogan from WrestleMania 5 type matches, especially I think the most memorable one for me for Macho Man in WCW was I think it was 97, might have been Spring Stampede, when he Diamond Dallas Page beat him in that huge angle that got DDP over like crazy whenever he refused to join the NWO and then faced off with the Macho Man, and they had a series of matches, I believe, and to me that was probably my favorite time of the Macho Man. He got a little weird during the 2000s, and he started coming out with women and dressing different, and got a little weird. But man, that classic Macho Man, like everybody probably thinks their favorite, not thinks, but I'm not trying to say thinks like they're wrong, but I mean everybody's opinion is normally when they think of Macho Man, they think of the mid to late 80s, the short trunks, the pink and the yellow and those colors with the shades. My version of Macho Man that I always remember the most is the one with the hat, from the early to mid 90s through like the 2000s. Of course, then the second to me is probably the NWO version of Macho Man, because being from my generation, NWO was like huge. But yeah, he made his debut there, and another person making their actual wrestling debut was Paul White. Of course, went on to be known as the Big Show. I didn't realize he debuted for like an independent company, which I always thought, they got him, he got him in the Power Plant, which is WCW's developmental, long before WWF even had one, before OVW and all that. WCW had their Power Plant, where they were training people, and it was like a developmental system. Not, they didn't have TV shows or nothing. They just trained them down there. I just assumed that he started there, but no, he started at an independent company and ended up actually meeting Hogan at like some charity basketball game or something. And Hogan got Bischoff to sign him to WCW the next year, and then he had been trained but not fully trained, and he was actually trying to get a tryout with WWF, and I can't remember who it was, but someone was trying to get Pat Patterson to sign him, and he actually thought that the person he was, like, he didn't know, like he said he was tall and everything, but he actually thought that the person they were trying to get signed was the guy that ended up being Kurgan, if you remember him from WWF, the Oddities, with ICP in the late 90s. I guess Patterson thought that was Kurgan, and I guess he'd seen him before and like hardly coordinated. If you know Kurgan, you know how bad he was. Sorry, no disrespect, but he wasn't a good wrestler. But I said WCW Hogan, everything but the Giant, Paul White. If you've seen especially his early matches, man, he could do all kinds of stuff. Moonsaults. They got him to stop doing the stuff eventually because they want him to act more like a giant, which I kind of get. But, I mean, I just seen the other day a match between him and Kane in the late 90s. It was like during, I think it was December. It was actually like the Christmas episode of 1999 of WWF. And him and Kane were like fighting almost like cruiserweights. You got to check that match out. It's on Raw if you can find it. Thanks to Netflix and WWE's crap, you can't find the Nitro or any of the Raws on Netflix other than the few ones they want to put on there, but that's another story. Anyway, yeah, he was signed by Bischoff, and then he went to the power plant. But sorry, that was like 15 minutes talking about wrestling. If you don't like wrestling, I'm sorry. But we're going to move on to sports now. Being December, pretty much the only sport that I cared about what going on was the NFL. And the season actually ended at the end of this month. Teams that made the playoffs for the AFC were the Dolphins, Steelers, Chargers. And then, of course, the wild card teams were the Patriots, Browns, and Chiefs. And then the Bengals, we ended up finishing third in the AFC Central, 3-13. Somehow we weren't even the worst team in the division. The Houston Oilers got that. They only won 2 games. So we won 3 games and still didn't finish last. That says a lot. Anyway, the NFC leaders were the Cowboys, the 49ers, and the Vikings. And the wild card teams were the Packers, Lions, and Bears. And this was the year the 49ers ended up beating the Chargers in the Super Bowl. Of course, that would happen next month in January. But, yeah, if you're talking 90s, there's a good chance it was either the year the Cowboys won it all or the 49ers won it all. Those teams dominated the 90s. Of course, you throw in, I start talking about 90s football. You talk about Aikman with the Cowboys, Joe Montana, and then Steve Young with the 49ers. And, of course, you got Dan Marino for the Dolphins. There's so many I can't even think of right now, but I mean, Brett Favre with the Packers. Barry Sanders, I know he wasn't the quarterback, but still, Barry Sanders was the standout player on that Lions team. I mean, there was some. Warren Moon was probably my favorite quarterback from the Oilers, even though they sucked that year. I don't know if he was still with them or not. But yeah, definitely some really good teams there in the 90s. I think any of those teams from the 90s could probably beat any of the teams of today if they could somehow play off against each other. But anyway, just a little bit about sports. And we'll talk a little bit about books now. Goosebumps came out with their 26th Goosebump book called My Hairiest Adventure. This is like a basic plot of a Goosebump books, but a kid finds this bottle of tanning lotion like in the garbage and decides to use it, and then starts growing hair everywhere, and he shaves it off and it comes right back. just a basic plot of a Goosebump book, but as kids we didn't realize that, like, you know, some of these stories are starting to sound the same and everything. You know, we didn't care. We were kids, you know. It's a new story. We'll read it. But anyway, this ended up becoming the 13th episode of the Goosebumps series, the very first season. I don't remember it off the top of my head. I know I've probably seen it. It's not one that sticks out to me like, of course, Haunted Mask, Night of the Living Dummy, Cuckoo Clock of Doom. You know, you got the ones that always like stick out for you. But I want to continue a series I've been doing. I found a list of like obsolete things from the 90s. I think it was like it was like a list of 50, but I shortened it to 30 because some of the things either weren't obsolete on the list that they were talking about or were just repeats. So I ended up narrowing it down to 30, and I've been doing like 5 a week. I can't even remember what we're on now, but there's still some more to go. But this week we're talking about some more obsolete things from the 90s. Talking about the differences in between. Now, I don't know what you call it in your area. Coca-Cola, Coke, soda. I call it pop. That's where we called it when we're from Ohio. I don't know wherever you live what you call it. You want to call it a drink, a soft drink, whatever. We call it pop. But anyway, talking about the differences, people probably won't realize it today, between pop cans and the pop bottles. The pop cans, and I think I've got some here. I've got these from my friend Taz. And these are actually older than I remember. These are actually Crush cans. It was the Bengals. Crush 'em in the Jungle. 55 WKRC, Cincinnati. Of course, I knew these were from Cincinnati. But yeah, these were, I think they were from the 88 season. But anyway, the point of it is, if you see the opening, it's kind of like that. But I remember from the 90s, the pop can opening being just like a circle. Not like a tiny circle, but it was like circular. I got the thing off, but I don't know if you can see. Now they're the wide ones. And my Baja Blast, since I can't have Surge. Thank you, Coca-Cola, for not keeping that. I should say they brought it back, but then they didn't keep it. But anyway, just like little differences like that. But also the bottles, like the 2 liters. If you remember from then, the 2 liters used to have like a rounded bottom. Like it was rounded like this, and I think it might have been flat on the bottom. Nowadays, of course, they got I don't even know what to call them. Look like feet, like claw feet or something on them. Just like the differences and stuff like that. Not that it's anything important. It's just stuff you recognize over time. You know, you live as long as I have for 40-something years. You recognize things that have changed. One thing that's definitely become obsolete, sad as it is, but I get why, is VHS tapes. I believe I talked about cassette tapes on here on this list before. But VHS tapes, the same concept. It's a magnetic tape that in case you don't know, you put into the VCR and you play tapes. You can play it. It plays from start to beginning. It's on a reel. It's got reels and it goes across and it plays on the screen. Trying to explain it is funny, but and you rewind it, fast forward it. And you either watch it to get to a point where you're going, or you turn it off. That's how you can always fast forward and rewind quicker when you turn it off. When it's on, it goes slower. But I don't know why I'm taking the time to describe this, just in case somebody's watching never got to use a VHS tape. But anyway, they were, of course, they didn't last forever. They'd get worn out. And of course, DVDs were so much easier to use, where you can just pick chapters, start the thing over. If you want to find a spot in a VHS tape, you're going to have to fast forward. Either fast forward it, turn it off to go fast, and turn it back on, and guess and have to rewind some, or do it while you're watching it and take forever. But yeah, DVDs, and then of course streaming, you don't even have to have the physical thing, which I like. I have I have a huge DVD and Blu-ray collection. Only got a few tapes now. I wish I still had all my tapes, but I mean, like I said, they just became obsolete. The greatest thing about them, though, is being able to record stuff off TV. You can't just put in a DVD and do that. You got to have stuff on your computer, on your hard drive, recorded from something, and then burn it onto that. But it was so cool just being able to put a VHS tape. That's why I had a collection of 300 or 400 tapes at one time. I would get, blank tapes and record, stuff on TV, and then later when I got the DVR technology came out with the digital cable, I could actually put the tape in, play it from the start. You don't have to make sure you catch it right at the beginning, and skip through commercials, so you didn't have to have the commercials on there. Although it's funny these days when I watch stuff, I'll watch old blocks of Saturday morning cartoons or stuff from Nickelodeon, and I'll actually really hope that the commercials are on there, because the commercials are even more interesting to me these days than the TV shows. Back then, when I was a kid, I couldn't wait for the commercials to be over. Nowadays, sometimes I'll skip through a show just to get to the commercials. It's funny how things change like that. But anyway, and another great thing about it is, even if you don't have a blank tape, if you had some movie you didn't care about, you could record over it. Now, there was copyright protection, but in those days, the copyright protection is a little tab that's taken off of the thing. So when you put it in a VCR, I guess there's a thing that goes in, and if it can go in, it's it won't let you record. However, that was the most easily fixable thing in the world, and this worked for cassette tapes too. They had 2 tabs on it. I think VCR. Did VCR have 1 or 2? I can't remember. Either way, you put tape over it. It's literally, that's it. It can be Scotch tape. It don't even have to be anything heavy duty. And it tricks it into recording. Like I said, the easiest thing in the world. You can't do that with DVDs. You can't take a DVD of some crappy movie you don't care about, put it on your computer and rewrite over it, unless it's one that's rewritable, which if you buy it, you buy a DVD at the store, it's not rewritable. Yeah, only blank ones are like that, when you record on them. But anyway, just the coolest technology, but these days, And like I said, they break down quickly. I remember my sister Emily, when she was like 3 or 4, she was obsessed with this Barney tape we had. It was like where they go to like this imagination island, and she loved this thing and literally wore it out to where it didn't work anymore. But the tape was still intact. I can't remember what happened. What was the reason that it didn't work anymore? But I think the tape box actually got cracked or something, or broken. So she was crying, but luckily me, I knew what to do. I had an old tape, so I took the tape out of that. You unscrew, because it has screws in it. You unscrew it, take the tape out. And I took the tape out of the old Barney tape and put it in a new one. And I came out with the Barney tape was like, it was either orange or pink, but the new tape case was black. And she's like, I don't care what it is, it ain't Barney. And I put it on, and Barney started playing out of this black tape that she'd never seen before. And she's like, oh, I was like her hero that day. It made her so happy. But yeah, I felt like some big shot, like, oh, I know how to fix a tape. The old technology ways that only us old wise ones know. Anyway, another thing that's become obsolete is maps, atlases, and globes. Now, I know they're still useful. I'm not saying there's no use for them, but really, does anybody use paper maps anymore other than older people, or maybe younger people like, ooh, let me try this technology? And I guess globes are, I don't know if globes are still used in school. I'm not in elementary school anymore. They may still use the globes, but most likely they don't. Most likely they say, get on your computer and look this up. But yeah, Google Maps, MapQuest before that, and I'm sure there's other apps and stuff, but they've made it to where you don't need all this stuff. But the one thing I will say, I ain't ever got on a map and had a route changed on me the way freaking Google Maps does. You'll be going somewhere, it'll be a straight shot, you think, and all of a sudden they got you turning on county road, turn this county road, turn this one. Soon you're off in the freaking gravel, you're almost in the swamp. One day I was going to a wrestling show in, can't remember if it was North Vernon or Seymour. But I was riding in the car with one of the wrestlers and just following along on the map. Didn't make any wrong turns. And soon we're literally in a grassy field where it's saying there's a road there and there's no road there. And it wasn't like there was like they let the road grow over something. There was literally no road there, but the map said it was. Got all turned around. Yeah. That's one advantage old maps and atlases had that freaking Google Maps don't have today. All their screw-ups and the fact that things can change. Now, I prefer having the Google Maps now. It says to go here and here, but sometimes, even just regular places we've been 100 times, it'll try to change it on you. Or it'll say, go down this road, when you know that if you go this road, it's better. It's Google Maps, you need to get better technology in there or something. But another one is Polaroid cameras. That was all the rage back in the old days, especially like the 80s and stuff. I never actually owned a Polaroid camera, although I did own one kind of cool camera. I got it at I think it was my 9th birthday party. We were living in Mount Carmel. It was before the Marky Faux days. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it was my stepdad from hell, basically. This is when we were still living in Mount Carmel, before we moved to Norwood with him. But I had a birthday party, and I ended up getting a Hulk Hogan camera, which I didn't even know existed. But it was like I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, because it was yellow and had Hogan on it, but it actually had a picture of Hogan in the corner on the thing. And when you took a picture, every picture you took, it looked like Hogan was standing with you, like it didn't look like realistically Hogan. It was like a little plastic thing. But I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. But even that, you had to have the film developed. Polaroid cameras were, of course, different. They instantly come out. Of course, nowadays, with nobody really printing pictures anyway, and if you do, that you take your phones to Walmart or some other place and get them printed out. But I mean, the days of the use of Polaroid cameras, and I talked about cameras with film and disposable cameras a couple episodes ago, but Polaroid cameras, yeah, it's a cool thing. And if people get them, like, oh, it's a retro camera, and it's still a cool thing. It's just like people don't use it. They got their phone, they take their pictures on there, they got it posted to their things. People care more about posting on social media than posting pictures on their own wall. That's another thing. If you guys remember back in our days, I don't know if they still might do it these days, but we used to have all kinds of stuff on our walls, depending on what you were into. bands, music artists, TV shows, superheroes if you're into that, wrestlers if you're into that, horror movie posters. Nowadays, if people have stuff, it's usually like posters they sell at Walmart or you buy on Temu or Amazon or one of them. But back in our days, we took pictures out of magazines, got actual posters, pictures of our friends or just whatever we wanted to put up on the wall. Just seemed there was a lot more to do back then because we weren't all focused on a phone and I'm not and the internet. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't be on the internet and phone, because I mean, if that stuff didn't exist, I wouldn't be doing this right now. But it just seems like there was a lot more for us to do back then. It's still funny when kids today say that they're bored. It's like, how are you bored? If I would have been able to get on the internet then, like when I first got on the internet, I was like discovering everything. Like I was going to like freaking site, not Wikipedia, but sites like that. Like when I could get on the encyclopedia at school, I was just looking up everything just because it was something to do, With all the information on the internet and all the games and all the social media and how can anybody ever be bored? But it happens. It happens to me sometimes. But, it's like, there's so much more available nowadays. It just seems like back in my generation and generations before, we were like more entertained by things than I think they are now. Like with TV and sports and video games and everything, I think, we were more entertained than today. It's like, seems like, it's weird. It seems like as time goes by and, more generations go by and more technology comes out that brings you more stuff to do, there's always seems to be less stuff to do to people. It's strange. But anyway, the last thing on the list is Beanie Babies. Now, of course, there will always be stuffed animals and everything, but you had to be alive in the 90s to really see the craze of the freaking Beanie Babies. People were collecting these like crazy, and there was talk of like, save these up, these are going to be worth so much, and then end up being, they're hardly worth anything. Unless you got like, I think there's like a Princess Diana one or something that's like worth a whole lot of money. But all these rare ones they came out with that said, you got to save these for your kids. They'll put them off to college. They probably won't even put them off to the store to buy a freaking bag of chips, which back in my day you could get a bag of chips and a pop for $0.25. That's beside the point. Yeah, the Beanie Babies were a huge craze then. But, I don't know why, but they ended up not being, probably because they hyped them up to be so collectible. But, there's one thing I want to talk about from school. It's an embarrassing story just because of how stupid I was. Okay, I've talked about here on here before about how my dad liked to make up stories and I'd believe them. It was during this time I actually wasn't in contact with my dad, thanks to Marky Foe. But I've talked about that before, and then it'd be another 5 years before I would get back in touch with my dad. I wouldn't say thanks to, but because of his brother, my Uncle Dan, dying, is what actually got us back into contact. Like I said, I wouldn't say thanks to that, even though a good thing came out of it. I still would never celebrate that at all because I freaking love my Uncle Dan. And I'll talk more in depth about him on an episode. I want to devote more time than just a couple sentences. But anyway, some of my dad's stories stayed with me. One of the ones that I always took, and I knew it was like, as a kid I didn't know, but as I got older I realized it wasn't true. But I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Creepshow, which, if you know me, is one of my big movies. Stephen King, George Romero movie. But there's the first story in it is called Father's Day, and it has Ed Harris, which of course would go on to become a huge Hollywood actor. It's like in one of his first roles, like is almost an unknown then. And my dad swore to me up and down that was actually him in Creepshow. And it's like, oh yeah, I see, I was younger then. I didn't have a beard then, which he didn't look nothing alike at all, not even close. And he's like, and I was like, but his name's Ed Harris. I guess that's why he said it, because his name's Ed. He's like, oh, that's just my stage name. They make you change your last name. So I believed this as a kid. And of course, I would go on to find out it wasn't true, obviously, just through logic. But that didn't stop me from being, when I was in 4th grade, telling the whole, well, not the whole school, but the whole class, that my dad was the famous actor Ed Harris. Like, like I was like, I did a lot to get attention during this time. Especially the next year, oh God, in 5th grade when the teacher was teaching us stuff about humpback whales, they literally sent me home because I wouldn't stop laughing and making jokes because it said hump and humpback whale, okay? That's how freaking attention starved I was in the school. Like, I was doing everything to try to get attention. But yeah, I was going on and on. My dad's Ed Harris. It's like, well, why are you living here instead of out in Hollywood? Oh, it's because my parents got divorced and he's always busy out there. He can't come and see me. But that was all it was, that would be one thing. Once all the attention from that died off, which you can imagine probably didn't take long at all, as more, you can just picture the kid just slowly backing away from me. But I decided, you know what? I'm gonna not only say that my dad is directing the next Leprechaun movie, but that he's got this famous actress in it, and I'm actually the one that's writing the script. I can't even say this with a straight face. Yes, he lives in Hollywood, has all this stuff, but I'm the one writing the script for this movie, okay? That's how we get the idea for, and I still say this is better than what came out, Leprechaun 4, Back to Ireland. As you may know, Leprechaun 4, Back to Ireland does not exist. Leprechaun 4 in Space exists. And by exist, I mean barely. I only own it on the Blu-ray collection, and it only goes on for me to laugh at. That movie is the worst Leprechaun movie, one of the worst movies in history. That thing sucks so bad. That was, oh God, that was, Leprechaun 4 in Space is horrible. But at the time, Leprechaun 3 had come out, the one where he goes to Las Vegas. I think it just come out, so that's why I was thinking of it. So I decided that I'm going to tell everybody that my dad, Ed Harris, is directing Leprechaun 4, and it's called Back to Ireland. And yeah, he's got this famous actress, Michelle Pfeiffer, which I didn't even know. I just heard the name as an actress. Like, I couldn't have told you then any movie she'd ever been in, but it was just a famous actress name that I remember seeing, like, in magazines and on, like, TV, on like those Inside Edition tabloid things and stuff. So that was who was starring in the movie, and I was going to meet her, and I was writing the script. And I actually sat there at lunch every day, and during class sometimes too, when I didn't have a wrestling magazine, and wrote out this script for Leprechaun 4 Back to Ireland, how he was going to go back over to Ireland, and like back in the old, he's going to go back in time, back in the like 1600s, and it was almost like I was taking parts of part 2 where he tries to find his bride. He's going to go find a wife over in Ireland, and all this other stuff's going to, I can't even remember. I wish I had that. That would be so hilarious to read these days. Yeah, but of course I had to tell everybody this, and you can imagine I sat by myself alone at lunch a whole lot. I just can't believe how stupid I was. Like I really thought, like, in my head, I thought people were going to believe this, okay? Not that I believed it, but I thought people were going to believe this. I don't know what I thought I was going to get out of attention, I guess. Like, oh, I'm going to have all these friends now because my dad's a Hollywood actor and director, and I'm writing a script for a Leprechaun. I still can't stay with a straight face. That is so messed up. Like, the fact that I thought that this was going to get me friends. I pretty much explained why I have no friends. Okay, now that we've established that I'm a dork since I was a little kid with no life, we're going to go around and talk about TV. No, I didn't say I had any family members in TV. But anyway, a debut that happened this month was a really good cart. I don't know what this, I was going to say poignant, but it wasn't a poignant cartoon. It was just one that really made an impression on me of a cartoon. Was Life with Louie. Debuted for Fox Kids. 3 seasons, over 38 episodes. And actually, the first 2 episodes were in prime time, you know, because they even did Goosebumps with that. And I think they might have done Power Rangers the same way, where they would show them in, like, Friday night prime time to get more of an audience, and then move it to Saturday mornings, which you never seen with the other stuff, like the Saturday morning cartoons. They normally didn't do that. But with Fox, they didn't have all the programming that, CBS, ABC, NBC had. But anyway, the first 2 episodes were there, and then the rest were on Saturday mornings. Of course, created by Louis Anderson, one of my favorites. Loved him in Coming to America as the guy that worked at McDowell's, not McDonald's. I might do an episode on Coming to America. That might be January's episode if you guys don't come up with a bonus idea. I don't even know what it would be. Like, going through it scene by scene. I may put little clips in it, not too much to give me a copyright strike. But let me know if you guys want me to do that, because just talk about how pivotal, like really pivotal that movie was, and like shaping the rest of my life. But anyway, Life with Louie was a funny cartoon. The one line I'll always remember, and Louie always talked in a whiny voice on there. He's like, but Mom. The one line that I'll always remember is, "Cats lick the butter." You'd have to see the episode to get the context of that. But we would repeat that forever. And as we said, me and my brother Josh said, we're laughing to the death, as we called it, just laughing to the death. But yeah, cats lick the butter. But a couple shows that were ending. Sonic the Hedgehog, which was actually the second Sonic cartoon. The first one was Sonic Adventure. This one was Sonic the Hedgehog. It was more of a darker cartoon than the Sonic Adventure was. That was of course, it was voiced by the same guy, I believe, Jaleel White from Urkel, obviously, Family Matters. But this was like a darker tone to this one. It went 2 seasons for 26 episodes on ABC, and it was a Deke cartoon, D-I-C, Deke, which of course we kids were always got a kick out of that. Look, it says Deke. It don't have a K on it though. Especially me with my humpback whales. But another one that was ending, sadly, was Tales from the Crypt Keeper, ending after 2 seasons and 26 episodes on ABC. Of course, it would be brought back 5 years later in 1999 for one more season on CBS, and it would be called New Tales from the Crypt Keeper. And of course, this is based on Tales from the Crypt, the TV show, and of course the comic books. But this was like the kid-friendly version on Saturday mornings. It was voiced by the same guy, but they made his voice a little bit different, so the kids weren't as scared. And of course, the Crypt Keeper was a cartoon, not the actual puppet. He was like this little, and it sort of resembled himself, but he was like green, and it was more comical. And of course, the second season actually added the Old Witch and the Vault Keeper, which were staples from the EC comic books, Tales from the Crypt. They were called the Ghoul Lunatics. But of course, the Crypt Keeper was always the more popular one, so that's why he ended up getting his own show and everything. But yeah, they ended up adding them in the second season, and they always tried to take over Crippy's show, as they called him. And then they were back for that third season in '99. And then another one that ended was a very popular cartoon, Garfield and Friends. That ended after 7 seasons and 121 episodes on CBS. And it didn't end because the popularity was down. In fact, it was, as popular as ever. But it was like a budget thing. Even though it was still getting good ratings, it was a budget thing because of the cost it cost to make it. And I guess CBS was like behind ABC and NBC for the Saturday morning cartoons, which I don't see how they were behind NBC. I hated NBC's stuff, especially as the more the 90s went on, because they would just focus more on teen stuff, not even have cartoons, and NBA inside stuff, and I didn't care about basketball, and the Saved by the Bell, the new class, which I didn't care for. But anyway, that's why Garfield and Friends pretty much ended because of budget reasons. And then a new TV network debuted, because it was around this time that digital cable was getting ready to start, or if it hadn't started in some areas, so they were adding more cable channels, was one that I've watched a whole bunch over the years, Game Show Network. And I've watched so many things on that. Of course, The Price is Right, Press Your Luck, Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy. I remember whenever they were calling it GSN, they had this game show on from midnight to 2 in the morning. It was like a call-in thing called GSN Live. And you could like call in and and try to play. I think we called in a few times, but we never actually got to play any of the games. We never got picked, but it would have been cool. But yeah, there's just been so many. Like, it was originally made to show reruns, and then they would get their own shows, like Whammy, the all-new Pressure Luck, which was, Pressure Luck, if you know, that's the one, no whammies, stop. That one from the 80s. They had that on there, but then this one was a newer version where when they would have, like, whammies, like, drop stuff out of the sky onto people. Really fun. I could go on all day about all the game shows that were on there, and Game Show Network's still going on. I think they've also got one called Game Show Central now that's like, you see it on all these free apps like the Roku app and Pluto TV and all those. And it's actually on, like, has its own, like, over-the-air channel. Like, if you get antenna, not antenna TV, the channel, but, TV from an antenna, where they put some of their shows on there. So, yeah, Game Show Network's still going strong because there's always been, I think there always will be an audience for game shows, whether they're classic game shows or new ones. I mean, they're always making new game shows. I mean, that's one genre that I don't think will ever end. But I want to talk a little bit about music. Of course, I like to give the number one songs for pop music and the number one songs for country. I wasn't listening to pop music at the time, but the Billboard Hot 100... This is like crazy, these stats, but Boyz II Men came out with the song On Bended Knee. They went number one for 2 weeks. Then the freaking song I've seen before, but I've never even heard it or even know if I'm pronouncing the name right, but Here Comes the Hot Stepper by Any Kamoze. I don't even know how to say it, but it was number one for 2 weeks, and I've never heard that song, but I've heard the title. I don't know what it's about. I have no clue. But anyway... Boyz II Men's On Bended Knee would take over the number one spot once again at the end of the month, and plus 3 weeks into the new year for 6 weeks total. Now, that alone is a pretty big stat there. But if you factor in the fact that, you want to know what the number one song was right before Boyz II Men's On Bended Knee? Another Boyz II Men song, I'll Make Love to You, which was number one for just a couple weeks, 14 weeks. So... 20 weeks at number one, minus that hot stepper, hop, skip, and hopscotch, whatever the freak that song is. There's people probably going, that's a good song. Well, I'm sorry, I don't know it, and it sounds weird to me. Anyway, yeah, 20 weeks at number one between those two songs at the end of December to the end of 94 into beginning of 95. That's like, that really shows how big they were. I'm surprised that they didn't have a longer run, but of course, as the 90s got to the end, world was moving on. It was more rap music, more alternative music, I think. More pop music, such as like other boy bands took NSYNC, Backstreet Boys. Really shows how fleeting the popularity is in the pop world, that they can have 20 weeks at number one, and 3 or 4 years later, they're not even on the radio anymore. I wasn't listening at the time, but my wife was. That's one of her favorite groups. She knows like the whole CD. I don't know which CD we have, but I think it's got those songs on it. But I mean, they were like giant. Of course, I was listening to country music, American Country Countdown. Number one for a week was George Strait's song, The Big One. And George Strait's had so many, like 60 number ones, I think, by now, that song people don't even hardly remember of his. That's how many number ones he's had. And not that it wasn't a good song. I'm just saying, like of all the songs, name me a George Strait number one. You say to country fans or George Strait fans. Not many of them's going to come out, with, the first thing that pops in your head. Not one's going to say the big one. It's going to be all the other stuff. Blue Clear Sky, I Cross My Heart, Amarillo by Morning. Those songs. They're not going to think of that one. And then, next at number one was John Michael Montgomery's If You've Got Love. I mean, this was the time when he was like blowing up. He was doing songs that actually All For One and Boyz II Men would cover. Was how popular he was getting. Then Joe Diffie, number one for 2 weeks with Pickup Man. And it's known as one of those novelty songs because it's not a serious song, but it's still a good song. The subject matter of it's funny. It's just talking about how, pickup trucks help you get dates. Basically, it's funny, but at the same time, it's so catchy and so good that you don't even think of it as a novelty song. It's just, a song you sing along with. And then to end the month, and it was only number one for 1 week, unless it had other weeks where it went back to number one. I wasn't sure. But I thought it would be longer weeks, at least in a row, was John Michael Montgomery again with I Swear, which, of course, All For One went on to cover and become a huge number one for them. But, I mean, that was probably his biggest song of all time, was I Swear, and it was only like number one for a week. It really shows you in country how hard it is to get to the number one spot and stay there. And on pop, like how many weeks in a row you actually stay there. But there was one album released this month, and it was a pretty big one for me. It was Garth Brooks' The Hits. Now, this was his first greatest. On Wikipedia, if you look it up, it says it's his second greatest hits album. There was one called the Garth Brooks Collection, which I actually finally bought. But it's not really a greatest hits collection. It's a CD of 10 songs, 2 each from his first 5 albums. But a lot of them are album tracks. Weren't even released as singles. And this was like a McDonald's thing. It was like you buy it with adult. It wasn't a kids meal thing, but buy a meal, and it's like $4 or $5. You get this CD. But it was like a sampling of like his first 5 albums, 2 songs. Some of it would be like some of his bigger hits, but some would be songs that weren't even released as singles. And for some reason, Wikipedia counts that as his first greatest hits album. I would not call it that. But anyway, this one was actually his first greatest hits album. He actually had to be talked into it by the label because he was, especially during that time, I know a lot of people say now, oh, he releases the same stuff all the time, and he does, but it's always for with his book collection, his autobiographies that came out. It's like a 5 or 6, I think it's a 6-book series, and he releases, each one has like 5 or 6 CDs with it. You don't have to put them in there. You could just buy the book. Some people are like, it's a picture. Well, it does have a lot of pictures, but it's got a lot of stories behind some of the songs and everything. It's really informative, especially if you're a Garth Brooks fan. But anyway, they're always like, oh, he just puts the same songs on there. Well, who cares? You're getting them for free. What's he supposed to do? Write new songs for a book collection that comes out 6 CDs worth? I mean, come on. Anyway, back then he didn't even want to do a greatest hits, but his label convinced him to. It was in between. It was during the time he was taking time off, like right after this. He took like a year off before he'd come back with his Fresh Horses album, which was the 6th album. But this is the first 5, and has 18 songs that were number ones from it, and like his biggest songs ever. Like those first 5 albums are probably where you find the majority of songs that everybody knows of Garth Brooks. I'll just go through them here. Ain't Going Down Till the Sun Comes Up. That song, if you ever tried to sing that song, you definitely got to take a breath before you start that. Friends in Low Places, I mean, that's iconic. Callin' Baton Rouge, one of his most popular live songs. The River, speaking like the word I used before, poignant. That song is poignant. That must be the word of the day. Much Too Young to Feel This Damn Old, his very first single that came out. The Thunder Rolls, with all the controversy with that, with the video got banned on the country stations, and they played it on MTV. Back before he was trying to cross over as Chris Gaines. That was a movie role, people, and a movie soundtrack, but people want to take it as Garth Brooks trying to be pop. He was already pop. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox on that one. American Honky Tonk Bar Association, which over time hasn't been like one of his biggest songs. Other songs have taken that place. Sometimes he don't even perform that in shows, but at one time it was one of his biggest. If Tomorrow Never Comes, off his first album, a great song. Unanswered Prayers, same category, but it was on his second album. Standing Outside the Fire, I especially remember the video for that one, with the kid that his dad wanted him to do Special Olympics, because I think he had Down syndrome, I think, but the kid wanted to actually go out for track for the regular team, not the Special Olympics team, and his dad was worried that his dad said he would hurt himself, but the mom pointed out, you're just worried he'll embarrass you, and it has a really good ending. If you haven't seen the video, it's really good. Rodeo, one of his classic songs. He always loves doing cowboy songs like that, especially about the rodeo. What She's Doing Now, great song there. We Shall Be Free, one of the songs that caused controversy, but it's still a good song and has a good message. Even if you don't agree with some of the things in the song, the overall message of just it's basically just loving one another. You know, like I said, there's some stuff in the songs that some might not agree with, some might not agree with certain parts of the song or whatever. But in the end, he's just saying love one another. It's always been kind of his message. Papa Love Mama, definitely not a song of love. That's a song of murder and adultery. Those are two like opposite ends there. Sometimes you get in country. Love one another. My wife's cheating on me. I'm gonna drive a semi through the hotel and kill her. It's funny those songs are back to back on there. Then we got Shameless, the Billy Joel album track that never got released as a single, that he was a monster hit, and for a while was my favorite song of his all time. That always fluctuates with me. Like, if you ask me now, I don't even know what my favorite song of Garth Brooks is all time. Then Two of a Kind, Working on a Full House, classic country sound. That Summer, another one of my all-time favorites. And then he ends it with, as he does with all his albums, his either favorite song or the one that he thinks has the most meaning. He ends it with The Dance, which, if you ask him, that's his favorite song he's ever recorded in his life. But a little bit more about the hits. So I give all the songs there. It actually sold 10 million copies, which is diamond, and then another that was just in the U.S. alone, and another 2 million worldwide. And then they buried the masters actually under his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, so they're there right now. But yeah, of course he's come out with other greatest hits since then, and like I said, re-released songs and stuff, and even put songs in like different orders on different things. But I don't care. I still collect them all. It's cool to have them. But one final thing about the hits album, Marky Fo actually took me to get this, like, I think it was like January, February. It wasn't the same month it came out. It was after that, sometime after Christmas. It was like one of the nicest things he ever did for me. He actually went out and bought me this tape, not CD then. They had the CDs, which I have now, but didn't have a CD player. I had a tape player. But it, like, over a couple months, I wouldn't say I wore the tape out. It kept getting stuck in parts, and then eventually the tape like broke and I couldn't fix it. And he wouldn't go buy me another one, which I was mad about. But anyway, that tape was defective for some reason. But anyway, still like great album. Obviously all greatest hits. Next I want to talk about one of my all-time favorite things to talk about, Tales from the Crypt. I don't get to talk about that on here too often because normally I only talk about it, the TV show, if it's in like the month I'm talking about and the year I'm talking about has it going on new episodes. But this week we actually do have one of those. They were in kind of the middle, towards the end of season 6, which of course is not one of their greatest seasons ever, but still has a lot of good episodes. In fact, the one after this month, which I won't be talking about because it's not, it's January of 95, is Doctor of Horror, is one of my favorites. But anyway, Snuggle, stop. My dog has this habit of like licking all the other dogs' faces, and they get tired of it and want her to stop. That was my dog growling at her in the background, Carlos. But anyway, Snog, don't whine. He don't want you to lick his face. I would say, you want the dog to sit there and lick your face all day? Like, literally, she'll sit there and lick his face constantly. And I had to tell her to stop 9 million times. But yet, the times that he tries to lick her face, does like 2 or 3 times, and she's already growling at him. It's like, well, if you don't like it, why are you doing it? Anyway, that's enough about my dogs. I could do a whole thing about my dogs one day. They're all crazy. Aren't you, Snuggles? She's mad I yelled at her. But anyway, Tales from the Crypt, Season 6, we start with Episode 8. It was called The Assassin. And it comes from the comic book, the EC comic book, Shock Suspense Stories number 17. Which was like a Tales from the Crypt, but they were called Shock Suspense Stories. More of like a... Those are the ones where they didn't put the actual like horror genre. They'd put them in things like that. And they had crime suspense stories. And I think there was another one. But this was Shock Suspense Stories. Anyway, this is one I don't remember much. It was about CIA agents. And like they had to kill somebody. But the guy's wife was there. And they said they had to kill her too. Because of... she was a witness, and I can't remember all of it because I barely remember it, but I do remember the Crypt Keeper segments. This is the one that had William Sadler on there, and it was a rather lengthy beginning and end for the Crypt Keeper segments. It had William Sadler, of course, He was in Demon Knight, which was, he played the main character Breaker on that. He played the Grim Reaper in Bordello of Blood, the opening segment. And he also played in the very first episode of Tales from the Crypt, the man who was Death, the executioner who lost his job because they got rid of the death penalty and he started killing people, only for them to bring the death penalty back and catch him in the act. If you guys remember that one. Anyway, he played the Grim Reaper in this, but it was the character he played in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, if you remember the Grim Reaper from that. Now, I've never seen that movie, but apparently it's a popular movie. Not apparently, it is a popular movie. But apparently that was like a popular character, and it is the Grim Reaper. Anyway, he plays that character in this with the Crypt Keeper. And he's like, this tomb's not big enough for the both of us. So they play a game that was played in Cutting Cards, one of the earliest episodes from, I think season 2, one of my favorite ones. They play a game called Chop Poker, where if you lose a hand, you lose a limb. They do that to see who wins the crypt. That's the one thing I remember from that the most. Episode 9 was actually on my top 40 Tales from the Crypt bonus episode. You can find that on here. It's actually 4 episodes, 10 in each one. It was number 27 out of 40. This is called Stared in Horror. It's from the Vault of Horror, number 23. And it's about a guy that's running from the law, and he finds this old woman's house and breaks in and is mean to her and ordering her not to tell the cops when they show up. And she goes upstairs, and when he looks upstairs, he sees this young woman. He thinks it's her granddaughter or something. But as she comes down the steps, she starts getting older and older and realizes it's the same woman. Apparently, this woman had an affair on her husband, and he put a curse on her that whenever she came downstairs, she would be old. She could only be young upstairs. But if anybody, if she tried to bring a guy over to be with her, anybody that went up the stairs where she would be younger would turn old. So it's you can't be young and young or even old and old in the same place together. But then they meet in the middle, and she's like, something my husband didn't realize, people can make love on the stairs. But anyway, at the end, the cops end up going in to search the house because the dog keeps going around, the police dog they got looking for him. And it turns out that he went up the stairs, but he's trying to get away so the dog don't sniff him, but he goes too far. So since he becomes he becomes older upstairs, so he goes too far, and he's this decrepit thing. It's literally rotting away, and she goes up to try to help him because he can't even move. He's so old. But she goes so far that she becomes a baby. So what's a baby going to do to save him? So that's how that ends. That's a crazy episode. Then episode 10 was called In the Groove. It was on Crime Suspense Stories, number 21, the comic book. I've only seen it once. There's a couple of these I've only seen once. This was one of them. It's about a shock jock that works for a radio station, the Howard Stern type radio host. But his sister runs it. And she can't fire him because of something in their mom's will or something. But he won't listen to her, and a whole bunch of stuff goes crazy. He ends up turning to murder, but it doesn't work out the way he planned. I'll just say that. I'll leave the rest of it for you. And then the last one was episode 11, called Surprise Party. It was from the Vault of Horror, number 37. Another one I've only seen once. It's about a guy who is going to claim this old burned out house from his dad. Left him in his will, and as he's going, they show flashbacks of when he was his dad was dying, or not dying, he was fine actually. I got that backwards. But his dad had told his son that he was leaving the house in the will to charity, and his son didn't like that, so he murdered the dad and burned the will. So he goes out to find this house, and it turns out there's people having a party in this house. But it turns out that the freaking people in the party and the house itself has a horrible legacy that he ends up finding out about. I'll just leave it there. But yeah, that's some Tales from the Crypt. We're going to actually now look at Nickelodeon lineup. And I chose just a random day from the month of December 20th, which is a Tuesday. So this is a weekday lineup. And if I remember correctly, I think December 20th is I think school was might have still been in. I don't know. Depending on where you were, either school was out on summer or winter break, or just getting ready to. So I don't know if I was watching during Nickelodeon during this day. But anyway, this is the Nickelodeon lineup for December 20th. And of course, we start with Nick at Night. So we start at midnight. We got Get Smart, Dragnet, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Adventures of Superman, The Lucy Show, one of my mom's favorites, F Troop, Taxi, Mary Tyler Moore Show, The Bob Newhart Show, Dragnet, Dick Van Dyke Show. Then we got Teacher to Teacher with Mr. Wizard, which of course Mr. Wizard is one of my favorite science hosts. Everybody loves Bill Nye the Science Guy in Beakman's World, but I love Mr. Wizard. But Teacher to Teacher is where he would actually talk with actual teachers. I never watched that one that much. It was always the Mr. Wizard's World, which I watched, which is actually on next at 6 in the morning. And that was part of Cable in the Classroom. If anybody remembers that, is where you could actually watch these things in the school. Obviously not at 6 in the morning. Nobody was in school then. But like, you could actually get to watch those during school. Our school didn't watch it. We didn't participate in Cable in the Classroom, which sucked. We got to middle school, they had Channel 1. If you guys remember that, I don't even know if that's still a thing, where they'd have like 5 minutes of news, I think, during the week in the morning, just like news things, but of course they put it in a way kids understand. Sort of like the Nick News, but it was Channel 1, so they tried to make it a little cooler. And of course, for us kids, getting to watch TV, even if it's news, instead of having to do schoolwork at the beginning of the day, was always good. And then Fridays was always like a 15-minute broadcast. You got even more minutes then. But anyway, next we got Flipper, then Bullwinkle's Moose-O-Rama, which was, of course, Rocky and Bullwinkle just repackaged under a different name for Nickelodeon, just like Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. And then at 8, my brother Josh's favorite show, Wienerville, hosted by Mark Wiener. No, they weren't trying to be perverted. The guy's actually last name was Wiener. Then at 8:30, Gumby. Love that one. Then at 9, we get start with Nick Jr. and one of the very first Nicktoons, Rugrats. Then The World of David the Gnome. Man, I love that cartoon so much. Muppet Babies. The Muppet Show, which I never really cared for. The only property of the Muppets I ever liked was the Muppet Babies. Didn't like the Muppet Show. Didn't like the Muppet movies. Then we got Allegra's Window, which was about a puppet, but like seeing life through her window. And then Gullah Gullah Island. I love that show. You learn so much about the culture. And I've said this before, but I always thought that was like some island off of America, like maybe somewhere near Jamaica or something. Not just because it was an island, but there was they had accents. They didn't have like the normal like American accent. Come to find out, it's just an island off of South Carolina. Can't remember what the actual name of the island was, but it wasn't Gullah Gullah Island. This is what they called it, but it was their culture was known as the Gullah culture, and you actually learned about that through the show, and it was like really fascinating for me to like learn this culture. And I didn't find out till doing research for this show, this podcast, maybe like a year ago, that it was actually an island off of South Carolina, not like over by Jamaica, towards Europe and stuff like I thought. Anyway, we got Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics, which is, of course, where they do a spin on a fairy tale. The Little Bits, which I never really watched. Eureka's Castle, I love that. That, to me, was way superior to the Muppets. And I found out through this podcast also that R.L. Stine was actually one of the creators of the show. Then we've got Lassie, Gumby again, The Adventures of Tintin. I love that one. It was like a French cartoon that they dubbed in English, but it's about Tintin, this like newspaper reporter that tries to solve mysteries with his dog. Then we got Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon again. Beetlejuice the series, love that cartoon. Muppet Babies again. Then we get to some really good stuff. Legends of the Hidden Temple, classic Nickelodeon game show, a staple. And then we got an hour of Clarissa Explains It All. Love that show. That was one of my favorites. Big one of my favorites, Hey Dude, about the kids working during the summer at the Bar None Ranch with Mr. Ernst. Then we got Rugrats again. Another one of the 3 original Nicktoons, Doug. Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon for a third time. And then at 8, we go back to Nick at Night, because, during those days, kids supposed to go to bed at 8. We got I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched. They always put those back to back. I don't know if they ever did a crossover with those two, but I wouldn't be surprised. And if they didn't, I was like, why didn't they? Does it like a natural crossover? Like, I wish they would have done a crossover between Addams Family and the Munsters. Can you imagine that? Or if today they can do a new movie or even a series Don't have Rob Zombie involved, please. Oh, that Munsters movie. I couldn't make it through 15 minutes of it. I've never finished it. I couldn't. It was, anyway. Mary Tyler Moore Show, Taxi, Bob Newhart Show, and then we end with the Dick Van Dyke Show. Well, that's our Nickelodeon lineup for the week. And I want to go over the TGIF lineup, which of course was always Friday nights on ABC. Family Matters, they were in season 6. And the only episode that aired, because this is, the Christmas month, so you don't normally get a full, month's worth of episodes. They have, preempting for Christmas specials and everything else. But the only episode that aired for Family Matters this month was actually a Christmas episode, which of course makes sense. And it was where Richie brought home this homeless guy. And they find him a place to stay. And he tells Carl about some toy that he wanted as a kid. And, and instead he's Santa Claus. Of course, they didn't believe him. And he ends up getting the actual thing. And then finally he realizes it was all along. It was actually Santa. Boy Meets World was on season 2. They had a couple episodes during this month. They weren't Christmas episodes, though. One was where Sean wanted to date 2 girls, so he had Corey date the other, and they go on a double date. But Corey started falling for the girl, but Sean wasn't having none of that because he was just supposed to hold her for him. And, of course, they both learned valuable lessons from this, that you don't do that to people. The other episode was the school was hosting a turnaround dance, which is where, because traditionally, the old traditional days, the boys asked the girls out. Well, this one was where the girls asked the boys out, and Corey's like freaking out the whole time because he was like, sure, nobody's going to ask him out and all this stuff. Great couple episodes there. And then Step by Step was in their 4th season, and then, of course, ending the night on TGIF was Hanging with Mr. Cooper. They were in their 3rd season, 3rd of 5, so they're right in the middle. A couple more things to talk about. We'll get out of here. I know it's been forever. I'm always talking forever, blah, blah, blah on this podcast. But, I mean, if you're watching or listening, that's what you're here for. Get my perspective on things. Remind you guys of things that you might have forgotten or, never even knew about. But talk about some kids' meal toys, which has become a staple on this, talking about. Of course, think of kids' meals. You always think of Happy Meals first, at least I do, from McDonald's. They had one of their months where they had the boy toys and the girl toys, and I know all the controversy and stuff with that, but still, it was, that's what they were called then, so that's what we're calling them on here. They were the Tonka toys for the boys and the Cabbage Patch toys for the girls, and I'm sure there's probably some girls that wanted the trucks and stuff, and there was some boys that wanted the Cabbage Patch girls. I'm not saying anything wrong with it, but that was normally how it goes back then. I don't even think they have things like that anymore. Probably too worried about lawsuits. But the Tonka toys included 4 vehicles: a crane, a loader, a grader, and a bulldozer. And of course they always had those toys for 3 and under, without the moving parts or things they can choke on, and it was a dump truck for them. And then the Cabbage Patch, the Cabbage Patch toys were 4 Cabbage Patch like figures. They weren't like full dolls. And then there was also one for the 3 and under. And they were just like different names. I didn't write down the names because I didn't recognize them. I'm sure Cabbage Patch fans probably would, but I didn't. Burger King had Lion King toys. And these were actually the same toys that came out during the summer. It was when Lion King was released in the theaters. But Disney decided, I guess for Christmas, to re-release it in theaters in December. So Burger King brought the Lion King toys back. These were 3 toys. There were figures. There was one of Simba, one of Timon and Pumbaa together, and then one of Scar. And then Wendy's came out with Good Sports. They were called Good Sports. They were featuring, those are pretty advanced toys here. Mini sports games for kids. Like they had a bowling set with like a ball and pins. They were like little. They weren't like a full-size set. There was a basketball one with a hoop and a ball. Obviously a mini one you can put on like a desk or like on the back of a door. You remember those? That's one thing you don't see today a lot. The basketball hoops on the back of the doors with like the little rubber ball that like fit in the palm of your hands and you can throw in. Golf, they had a putter, a putting green, and a ball. Hockey, they had like a net, a goal, and a puck. And then they had a football. So pretty cool stuff there from Wendy's. Pizza Hut, kind of in the same vein but going funny, had Mascot Misfit toys. I'm saying that 5 times fast. But these are like funny sports mascots as toys, like the mascot would be part of a football. There was like 2 of those, and then there was like a soccer one. And then Hardee's had the funniest name ever, I think, for a kid's toy. Tuna fish. Not an actual tuna fish, like you weren't getting a tuna fish sandwich from there. Tune a fish, as a tune as in play a tune. Because they were like these like whistle things, but it was like fish. So you either blow into the, I think it was the mouth. I hope it wasn't the butt of the fish. But you blow into the fish and it makes noise. Like, what were you thinking, Hardee's? No wonder you're going out of business now again. But I talked about that last week. The whole how Hardee's just isn't the same Hardee's anymore. But I thought I would end this podcast by talking about some of the top Christmas toys of 1994. Because of course, I mean, doing December, got to talk about the Christmas toys. The Casio Secret Sender 6000, which I discovered for this the first time. I never even heard of it. But it was supposed to be like a Palm Pilot, which was becoming popular then. But it was supposed to be used by kids to send like secret messages through infrared. I guess supposedly you're supposed to do it like, it's meant to be like done for like if you're around your friends. But it was like unofficially for during school, you know, if you didn't get caught. But apparently they didn't work very well. You know, infrared technology nowhere near anything like, you know, cell phone technology of today. So they didn't work half the time, and only the richer kids got them anyway. Mr. Bucket, that was a funny one. It was about this robotic bucket that go around spitting colored balls out of its mouth, and you got to pick them up. Sort of like the elephant thing that came out a couple years later, where the air blew up and you had to catch the butterflies. This was catching balls out of Mr. Bucket's mouth. Gotta love the 90s. By far the biggest selling toy of the year, though, was the Power Rangers toys. So many different ones. All the toys, the Zords, Power Ranger costume, masks, Power Morpher coins, the weapons. You can go on and on. My favorite of all time will be, and I got it that year for Christmas, was the Power Ranger, the head flipping ones. Where, like, well, whichever way you started out, it had 2 heads. It had the... You know, it was already in the Power Ranger costume, the outfit, whatever you want to call it. But then it had the head of the costume, like, you know, the helmet. But you'd flip it over to reveal, you know, the guy's face. The one I had was the Green Ranger, so it was Tommy. So it'd be the Green Ranger helmet. You flip it over, and it's Tommy's face. It was like the coolest thing ever. I never had a full set. I only got the green one, but I loved that. Like I said, I also had like a rubber Power Rangers, like the ones that you can't really pose. They're kind of like stuck in a pose, not the regular action figures. I had some of those. Just like anything they could come out with, just like with the Turtles craze of the 80s with their toys. Power Ranger toys were by far the biggest sellers of the year. And of course, Dr. Dreadful Food Lab, if you remember that, where you could just make like these science experiment, but there were things you could actually eat, but they looked like gross things and science experiments. We were some weird kids in the 90s, I'm telling you. And of course, this was also during the time of the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo wars. You know, kind of wrapping up on those, but they were still, you know, competing neck and neck. The games were like $60 a piece, and everybody, you know, thinks of, you know, the game prices today, and yeah, they're ridiculous. But the good thing about games those days, even though the graphics were more limited than what they do these days, obviously, but you actually got the full game then. You didn't get a partial game you got to download this for, or pay for a season pass of this and get home and update the system. You just put it in and you're playing a game within 2 minutes. I mean, can you get any game these days and put it in and start playing it immediately? No, it's got to download the game. Even if you got the physical disc, it's still got to download it to the thing. It's dumb. I know it helps with loading times, but I mean, couldn't they figure it out where it helps with the loading times and you can play it off the disc so you don't have to download it? Not even talking about downloading stuff online for the game. Like, the actual game has to download onto the system. So frustrating. Anyway, the big game they were marketing at the time was Donkey Kong Country, which I've never actually played. I know it's one of the staple games, like of Super Nintendo, but I've never actually played that. And then, of course, you can't go wrong with Micro Machines and Hot Wheels and, like, the tracks and the garages and all that stuff. If you're a kid from the 90s, doesn't matter gender or race or anything, Micro Machines and Hot Wheels were, you know, you had to have at least one, if not a whole collection of them usually sitting in a box or a shoe box or something, or toy box or anything. And of course, your parents are always yelling at you to pick them up because they'd come in and step on them. Especially the micro machines, that could take out a parent's foot quickly. Pogs were starting to become popular at this time. If you remember those, the Pogs and the Slammers. The Pogs are like these cardboard things. They're called milk caps because they resembled like the old milk caps of the old milk bottle, the glass bottles that the milkman would bring over back in the days before you go buy the gallons of milk at the store and stuff. They resembled the lids for those. And there was like the cardboard ones, and they had everything on them. Anything you can imagine. A TV show. They had bands, brands, different designs. People were getting personalized one made. But anyway, you'd have a collection of these, and then you'd have metal ones called Slammers, and it was a game you'd played. And, you would collect, win Pogs from other people, and people would be trading them. It became a huge thing at school. This is like right when it was getting really hot. My voice cracked there. Really hot. I'm going through puberty I probably was around this time anyway. Turned 11, I probably was. Talk Boy and Talk Girl. Of course, the Talk Boy made famous in Home Alone 2 by Kevin and that. But everybody wanted one of those, and they won one for boys and girls. I never owned one, but the kids actually got a Talk Girl from like the Free Store. There was like this place, like when they were kids, like people would bring stuff, donate it, and you could just go there and get it. It was the Free Store. There was no limit, whatever you wanted to get. And people would bring stuff, clothes, toys. Anyway, they got the Talk Girl from that. And it's just like you see on there. You record stuff, you can play it back at funny voices and different speeds and everything. Another thing that was popular at the time, they re-released the original Nintendo. But it was like a top-loading one. Because if you remember the original one, you lift up the cover, you put it in. This one was like a top-loading one. And they actually started selling some of the classic Nintendo games for like... They would be on sale anywhere between $10 and like $17. Which, of course everybody wanted Super Nintendo. But like when I was a kid, or even more like a teen and an adult, like when Sega Dreamcast came out, I didn't get it right away. I got a Sega Genesis 3, actually, the third model. And then when like... they were coming out with PlayStation and Xbox. That's when I got the Sega Dreamcast. Well, it was a little bit before then. It was like 2000. I got it like maybe a year, or maybe 2001. I can't remember which. No, it was 2000. Yeah, it was definitely 2000 because I remember I was in Indiana with it. Anyway, I wasn't able to get the latest system at the time always. So that would have been, some people are like, oh, you got a Nintendo. That's old. I never did own the top-loading Nintendo, but it seems really cool. If you owned it, let me know in the comments of... if it played differently, if it was faster, if it was slower, if there was any problems, or if it just played just like a regular Nintendo did. But Tiger handheld games, of course I talked about this during the video game thing. Everybody remembers those Tiger handheld games. They seemingly made one for everything. With those LCD screens, you could barely see what's going on. But as a kid, you love these things. If you tried to pick them up now, I guarantee you'd be like, we played this garbage? But anyway, the ones that were marketing the hardest were Sonic 3, which is... the Tiger version of Sonic 3, the game for Dreamcast, not Dreamcast, I almost said Sega Saturn and Sega CD. I said everything but Sega Genesis. Power Rangers, of course, and Jurassic Park. And then obviously board games were popular, like the Mr. Bubbles, or what was I saying? Mr. Bucket, not Mr. Bubbles. Mr. Bucket was not really considered a board game, but sort of in the same vein, but They came out with Scrabble Deluxe, which I remember my mom getting, was like a really fancy version of Scrabble. Eat It Ralph's. I remember that commercial or the commercial and the game where like you would puke out these. You had to feed it these things, and you feed it too much, and it would puke out the food. Again, 90's kids. What were they thinking? What were we thinking? And of course, classic games like Perfection, which a lot of people say that's where people's anxiety comes from today, is playing that game as a kid. Because you got like, I think it's 30 or 45 seconds, I can't remember the timer, but you push the thing down, and then you gotta put these pieces in, and they're all different shapes, and half shapes and stuff, and you gotta find where they fit, and you gotta get them all in there. If you don't get it by the timer, the thing pops up and everything goes everywhere. Like, that's where a lot of people's anxiety started. But it was a lot of fun this week talking about some of this Christmas stuff and all these toys. Always gets me in the nostalgic Christmas mood, especially now because it's I I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks till Christmas. But next time I'll be with you won't be Christmas. Well, it'll still be Christmas time. If everything goes okay and I don't have no medical emergencies again, I'll be recording this next week about the same time. We're going to go on episode 57. We're going ahead, the farthest I've ever gone ahead so far in this. I've done a couple episodes from 1999, but I think January and February were those episodes. This one is going to be in May of 1999. I was 15 years old at the time in 8th grade. I said it's my third trip through 1999. So join me next week for May of 1999, and in between now and then, let me know if you got any comments, and we'll see you then.
And now, I predict the future. Next week, you'll be in the same time, same place, same station, for another hideous, hateful haul of horror.